The glass enclosure glimmered under the artificial lighting, filled with lush green plants and various enrichment items, a place designed to mimic a habitat, not a home. Sam pressed his hand against the cold surface, watching as the Drogar handler, a towering reptilian alien with iridescent scales, tossed a handful of nutrient pellets into the enclosure. The other humans scurried to grab what they could, some out of habit, others out of genuine hunger. Sam stayed where he was, eyes narrowing as he tracked the alien's every movement. To the Drogar, humans were nothing more than exotic pets, rare creatures from a remote, insignificant planet. They were prized for their curious behavior, expressive faces, and amusing antics. The Drogar Empire, with its obsession for cataloging and controlling lesser species, had scooped up humans as trophies. They kept them in elaborate enclosures, showcasing them to visitors like one might show off a prized hunting dog or a clever parrot. Humans were thought to be amusingly clever, capable of learning tricks and imitating behavior, but never intelligent enough to pose a threat. Sam intended to prove them wrong. Behind him, Tessa crouched near the food pile, slipping a few extra pellets into her pocket for later. She was quick, sharp, and could read a situation faster than anyone Sam had ever known. She'd once been a combat medic before the Drogar snatched her from a refugee transport ship. Now, like the others, she was caged, but she was far from broken. Tessa joined Sam by the glass, her voice low. "They're getting bored with us." Sam nodded. He'd noticed it too. The Drogar handlers no longer lingered by the enclosures, no longer laughed when the humans mimicked them or performed tricks, and boredom, in a place like this, was dangerous. "I heard two of them talking earlier," Tessa whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure the others weren't listening. "They said we're going to be transferred. Rehomed, they called it." Sam clenched his jaw. He knew what that meant. The Drogar Empire's solution to an unprofitable pet was to relocate it to a labor facility, or worse, sell it to one of the outer colonies, where conditions were rumored to be brutal beyond imagination. "They'll split us up," Tessa continued, her voice tight with frustration. "Send some of us off to work mines. Sell the rest to whoever bids the highest. We have to do something, Sam." He gave her a grim nod. They'd already discussed escape, but it had always seemed like an impossible dream. The Drogar kept them under constant surveillance, and the enclosures were reinforced with technology far beyond human understanding. But now, with time running out, escape wasn't just an option, it was a necessity. "We're getting out," Sam said, keeping his voice low but firm. "We have one chance, and we're taking it." The small group of captives gathered around him, their faces worn but determined. There was Marlowe, a former engineer who had worked on starship engines, and Lena, a linguist who had picked up bits and pieces of the Drogar language from overhearing their conversations. Paul, an ex-con with a penchant for trouble, gave Sam a crooked grin. "About damn time." Sam outlined the beginnings of a plan. They'd been watching the Drogar handlers for months, noting their routines and identifying gaps in their security. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Drogar were arrogant, confident in the belief that their human pets were too stupid to do anything but follow commands. That arrogance was going to be their undoing. "We'll use the maintenance corridor," Sam said, pointing to the small hatch near the back of the enclosure. The Drogar used it to clean the habitat, never bothering to lock it because, to them, it was impossible for the humans to escape. Tessa nodded. "And once we're through, we head for the docking bay." "Exactly." Sam looked at Marlowe. "Can you hack the maintenance systems? Get us through the inner doors?" Marlowe gave a wry smile. "Piece of cake." Paul cracked his knuckles. "And if any of those scaly bastards get in our way," Sam met his gaze evenly. "We do whatever it takes." There was no room for hesitation. The Drogar would never give them a second chance. If they were caught, they wouldn't just be rehomed, they'd be executed as dangerous animals. Sam glanced around the enclosure one last time. It was a strange, surreal place, filled with objects designed to amuse them, to keep them docile. But all it had done was sharpen their minds and strengthen their resolve. "This ends tonight," Sam whispered. "No more cages." The others nodded, their faces grim with determination. They had been pets for too long, entertainment for beings who saw them as nothing more than amusing creatures. But humans were more than that. They always had been, and now The Drogar were about to learn what happened when you underestimated a species that had evolved by surviving against all odds. Sam tapped out a sequence in Morse code against the wall, one last signal to confirm the plan. Tessa and the others responded with quiet taps of their own. Sam crouched by the maintenance hatch and gave it an experimental tug. The latch came loose with a faint click. He exchanged a glance with Tessa. "They don't even lock it," she muttered. "Idiots. Overconfident idiots," Marlowe whispered. "That's their weakness." Sam couldn't agree more. The Drogar viewed their human captives the way a zookeeper might view animals at the petting zoo. None of them ever imagined humans were capable of anything more than basic mimicry. But mimicry, Sam thought with a smirk, was just another form of learning. As Sam held the hatch open, Paul slipped through first, his wiry frame disappearing into the darkness of the corridor beyond. Marlowe followed, his eyes scanning for any traps or alarms. Lena gave Sam a quick nod before crawling through after them. Tessa went last, giving Sam's shoulder a reassuring squeeze as she passed. Sam took one last look around the enclosure, the place where they'd been caged, humiliated, and underestimated. And then, with a final deep breath, he climbed through the hatch, pulling it shut behind him. The Drogar thought they had captured harmless creatures. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. The dim, cramped maintenance corridor was a far cry from the lush, carefully designed enclosure the humans had been trapped in, but to Sam and his team, it felt like freedom. The stale air tasted better than anything they'd had in months. The corridor stretched in both directions, dark and cluttered with pipes, cables, and panels that no Drogar had bothered to hide. After all, who expected pets to crawl through these spaces? This was exactly what Sam had hoped for. The Drogar's arrogance was their biggest weakness. Now, it was time to turn that weakness into an advantage. Tessa slid the hatch closed behind them, locking it as a precaution. She crouched beside Sam, her breath steady despite the tension crackling in the air. So far, so good. What's next? Sam looked back at the small group, Paul, Marlowe, and Lena, who were waiting for their orders. Each of them wore the same expression, a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. They knew this was their only shot, and they wouldn't get a second chance. "First step," Sam whispered. "We reach the inner security door. Marlowe, think you can get us through it?" Marlowe gave a lazy grin, pulling a small multi-tool he'd fashioned out of stolen components from his pocket. If the Drogar designed their security systems with the same care they designed that hatch, this'll be a walk in the park. Sam gave him a sharp nod. "Good. Everyone stays quiet. Stays focused. The Drogar patrols usually rotate every 20 minutes. If we time it right, we won't even see them." Paul smirked, cracking his knuckles. "And if we do?" Tessa shot him a warning glance. "Then we don't get caught. Keep it clean, Paul." They crept down the maintenance corridor, their footsteps light against the metal floor. Every sound seemed amplified in the stillness, but the hum of machinery helped mask their movements. Sam led the way, mentally counting the steps to the inner security door based on the layout he'd memorized. It wasn't far, just a few more turns. When they reached the door, Marlowe knelt beside it, inspecting the control panel. He clicked his tongue. "Yeah, just like I thought. These guys are overconfident idiots. They're using a standard proximity lock." He pulled out his multi-tool and went to work, popping open the panel and rearranging the wiring with the ease of someone who'd spent half his life fixing things. "Give me 2 minutes." Sam crouched beside him, keeping an eye on the corridor. "How long before the next patrol?" Lena checked the small digital timer they'd rigged earlier. "We've got about 8 minutes. Plenty of time if Marlowe doesn't screw up." Marlowe scoffed. "I never screw up. I just improvise." Tessa gave Sam a sideways glance. "Remind me why we trust him." "Because he's the only one who knows how to make things work," Sam muttered, a small smile tugging at his lips. He trusted Marlowe, improvisations and all. They'd all been thrown into this situation with no warning, no preparation, and no idea if they'd survive. Improvisation was what they did best. A soft click echoed from the door as the lock disengaged. Marlowe shot Sam a smug grin. "Told you. Piece of cake." Sam gave him a pat on the shoulder. "Nice work. Let's move." The door slid open silently, revealing another dimly lit corridor that led deeper into the facility. The air smelled of coolant and metal, and the faint hum of engines vibrated through the walls. They were getting closer to the docking bay, closer to freedom. They moved quickly and quietly, every step calculated. Lena took the lead now, using her knowledge of the Drogar language to read the signs and navigate the labyrinthine hallway. She'd spent months listening to their captors, memorizing key phrases, and decoding their writing. Now, that knowledge was paying off. This way, she whispered, pointing to a junction that branched off toward the docking bay. We're almost there. Sam nodded, signaling for the others to follow. But as they turned the corner, they froze. A Drogar guard stood just ahead, his back turned, fiddling with a control panel. Sam's heart pounded in his chest. If the guard turned around, the entire plan would fall apart. They'd be dragged back to their cages, or worse. Tessa slowly reached into her pocket, pulling out a small object, a toy ball from their enclosure. Without a word, she lobbed it down the opposite corridor. It bounced against the wall with a soft thud, rolling away into the darkness. The guard's head snapped up, and he turned toward the sound, his heavy footsteps echoing as he moved to investigate. Sam gave Tessa a grateful nod, and they slipped past the distracted guard, moving deeper into the corridor. They reached the final junction just as the docking bay doors came into view. Relief washed over Sam, but it was short-lived. The doors were sealed tight, protected by a security terminal that looked far more advanced than the ones they'd encountered so far. Marlowe whistled low under his breath. That's not just a lock, that's a military-grade firewall. Can you break it? Sam asked. Marlowe hesitated. Not with the tools I've got, but I might be able to overload it. It'll set off every alarm in the building, though. Sam clenched his fists. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was their only option. Do it. We'll deal with the alarms. Marlowe nodded, pulling out his multi-tool and getting to work. The others stood guard, tense and ready. Every second felt like an eternity as Marlowe rewired the terminal, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Then, with a sudden surge of sparks, the terminal flickered and died. The docking bay doors slid open with a low hiss. Alarms are coming, Marlowe warned, already packing up his tools. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they're on us. Then let's not waste any time, Sam said, leading the way into the docking bay. The docking bay was massive, filled with ships of all shapes and sizes, but they didn't need anything fancy, just something fast enough to get them off the station and far away from Drogar territory. There, Paul said, pointing to a small transport vessel near the back of the bay. That one looks quick. Sam sprinted toward the ship, the others close behind. They reached the vessel just as the alarms began blaring, red lights flashing throughout the bay. The Drogar guards would be on them any second. Get the door open, Sam ordered, his voice tight with urgency. Marlowe slapped the control panel, and the ship's hatch hissed open. They scrambled inside, slamming the door behind them. Paul, find us some weapons, Sam barked. Tessa, get to the cockpit. Marlowe, see if you can get this thing flying. Marlowe gave a quick salute. On it, boss. Tessa bolted toward the cockpit, her hands already flying over the unfamiliar controls. We're flying blind here, Sam. I've never seen a ship like this before. Figure it out, Sam said, strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat. It's what we do. The engines roared to life, and the ship shuddered as it lifted off the ground. But just as they prepared to launch, the docking bay doors began to close, sealing them in. Hold on, Marlowe shouted from the back. I've got an idea. He yanked a power cable from the wall and jammed it into the ship's control console. The lights flickered, and the engines roared louder. With a deafening blast, the ship shot forward, narrowly squeezing through the closing doors and blasting into the void of space. For a moment, they were weightless, drifting free in the vast expanse of the galaxy. Then the ship's scanners beeped, and Sam's heart sank. A massive Drogar warship was already on their tail. Guess the hard part's just getting started, Sam muttered, gripping the controls tighter. Tessa gave him a wild grin. Wouldn't have it any other way. The stolen transport shuddered as it careened through the vastness of space, the rumble of its unfamiliar engines vibrating through every bolt and rivet. Sam gritted his teeth, keeping a firm grip on the controls while Tessa frantically worked at the navigation console beside him. Behind them, The Drogar warship loomed in pursuit, its enormous bulk gliding through space with terrifying ease. "Any chance this thing has weapons?" Sam called out, glancing at Tessa with a flicker of hope. "Not unless you count rust as a weapon," she replied, grimacing at the console. "I think we stole the galaxy's most underwhelming ship." Marlowe popped his head in from the back. "Good news, we're not dead yet. Bad news, I'm 80% sure that's about to change." Sam shot him a look. Helpful. Alarms blared through the cockpit as the Drogar ship began firing, emerald green plasma bolts streaking past their tiny vessel. Tessa twisted a dial on the console, engaging evasive maneuvers that sent them into a sharp, stomach-churning dive. The stars outside twisted in every direction as their ship plunged deeper into the blackness of space. "I'm open to ideas here, people," Sam muttered, adjusting the controls to steady the transport. "We can't outrun them forever." Lena, their linguist and part-time navigator, leaned over Tessa's shoulder. "If we can't outrun them, maybe we can outthink them. See if there's any debris fields nearby. We could lose them in there." Tessa scanned the star map, her fingers flying across the console. "There's a derelict scrapyard about 20 clicks from here. Abandoned warships, old satellites, industrial junk. It's risky, but it might be our best shot." "Perfect," Sam said, angling the ship toward the coordinates. "Hang on tight. Things are about to get bumpy." The ship shot forward, engines straining as it accelerated toward the scrapyard. Behind them, the Drogar warship stayed in relentless pursuit, plasma bolts tearing through the void, one of them glancing off the transport's hull with a searing explosion. The impact jolted the entire vessel, sending sparks flying from the consoles. "Shields are down," Marlowe yelled from the engine room, cursing as he tried to reroute power. "Not that we had much to begin with. Just get us into that debris field," Sam growled, hands steady on the controls as he swerved to avoid incoming fire. The scrapyard loomed ahead, an endless expanse of twisted metal, shattered starships, and derelict satellites spinning lazily through the void. It was a chaotic graveyard of forgotten battles, the perfect place to hide or get lost forever. Sam steered the transport straight into the heart of the scrapyard, weaving between rusted wreckage and jagged fragments of ancient hulls. The Drogar warship followed closely, firing wildly into the maze of debris, but its sheer size made it slower and less agile than the humans' stolen ship. "Keep moving," Tessa urged. "If we slow down, they'll pin us against one of these wrecks." "Working on it," Sam grumbled, steering through a narrow gap between two ruined cruisers. The hulls scraped against their transport's wings, sending a grating screech through the ship's interior. "Could use a little less commentary." Paul appeared in the doorway, grinning despite the chaos. "Want me to throw something at them? I've got an old shoe. I'll let you know," Sam muttered. "For now, just buckle in and try not to die." The Drogar ship continued its pursuit, plasma bolts ripping through the scrapyard, sending shards of debris spinning in every direction. But as the maze of wreckage grew tighter and more convoluted, the Drogar began to struggle. Their massive warship scraped against the twisted metal structures, slowing them just enough to give the humans a narrow window of escape. "There!" Tessa shouted, pointing to a small, heavily damaged cargo freighter floating ahead. "We can hide inside that wreck. It's got enough shielding left to block their scanners." Sam angled the transport toward the freighter, slipping through a jagged tear in its hull, just as another plasma bolt sizzled past them. The transport shuddered as it came to a halt inside the dark, cavernous interior of the derelict ship. Sam killed the engines, plunging them into silence. Everyone held their breath as the Drogar warship drifted past, its searchlights sweeping through the scrapyard, but missing the freighter by inches. Moments later, the warship disappeared into the distance, still searching for its prey. Sam exhaled, slumping back in his seat. "We're clear, for now." Marlowe let out a low whistle. "You know, that went better than I expected." "Don't jinx it," Tessa warned, already checking the transport systems. "We're not out of the woods yet. This ship is barely holding together, and it's only a matter of time before the Drogar figure out where we went." Sam stood, stretching his sore muscles. "Then we need a plan. Fast." The crew gathered in the small, cramped interior of the transport, brainstorming their next move. The stolen ship wasn't equipped for long-distance travel, and they didn't have enough fuel to make it far. But staying put wasn't an option either. The Drogar would eventually return, and when they did, they wouldn't show mercy. "What about finding a place to refuel?" Paul suggested. "There's gotta be a black market station somewhere around here." "Too risky," Lena said. "The Drogar monitor most of the trade routes. We'd be walking right into a trap." "Then we need allies," Tessa said firmly. "Other captives, other species who've been under Drogar control. If we can find them, we can organize something bigger." Sam nodded thoughtfully. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was the only real option they had. "Tessa's right. Running isn't going to work. We need to fight back." The idea hung in the air, heavy with both possibility and fear. They were just a handful of humans with a barely functioning ship, stranded in a scrapyard in the middle of nowhere. The odds were stacked against them, but Sam knew something the Drogar didn't, something that had kept humanity alive for thousands of years. When humans were backed into a corner, they fought with everything they had. "Okay," Sam said, standing tall. "Here's the plan. We find other captives, rally them, and hit the Drogar where it hurts. Supply lines, depots, anything we can sabotage. We make them regret ever underestimating us." Paul grinned. "Now, that's more like it." Lena gave a cautious nod. "If we can get word out, there are species who'd join us. The Drogar aren't exactly popular." Marlowe cracked his knuckles. "And if we do it right, they won't see us coming." Tessa clapped Sam on the shoulder. "Looks like we just started a rebellion." Sam smiled grimly. "About damn time." With their course set, the crew went to work. Marlowe began repairing the transport's damaged systems, while Lena scoured the star maps for potential allies. Tessa and Paul prepared weapons and supplies, readying the ship for the battles ahead. They had escaped the Drogar once. Now, they were going to make sure no one else had to suffer under their rule again. As the engines hummed to life and the transport slipped back into the endless expanse of space, Sam couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. They were free, and they weren't done yet. This wasn't just an escape. This was the beginning of something bigger, a fight for freedom, not just for themselves, but for everyone who had ever been caged, beaten, or broken by the Drogar Empire. The Drogar thought they had captured harmless creatures. They were about to find out just how dangerous humans could be. The stolen transport drifted silently through the void, hidden beneath the shadow of an asteroid field. Sam leaned back in the pilot's seat, scanning the star map on the console while Tessa worked beside him, analyzing the scarce data they had on nearby systems. Marlowe was in the engine room, patching up what he could, while Paul and Lena took stock of their dwindling supplies. They were free, but barely. The Drogar had them outgunned, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered. Running forever wasn't an option. Tessa glanced at Sam, her brow furrowed. "There's a small outpost a few systems from here. It's a mining colony, mostly populated by slaves. I bet the Drogar won't expect us to show up there." Sam nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "If we're going to start something, that's where we'll do it. We rally the slaves, disrupt the supply chain, and show the galaxy that resistance is possible." Paul appeared in the doorway, tossing a ration bar between his hands. "You think they'll join us? I mean, not everyone's crazy enough to pick a fight with the Drogar." "They will," Lena said softly, stepping into the cockpit. "They just need to know it's possible." Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen despair up close and knew how dangerous hopelessness could be. Sam stared at the blinking dot on the star map, marking the location of the mining colony. This was it. They couldn't run anymore. It was time to fight back. "All right," Sam said, adjusting the ship's course. "We set a course for the colony. Let's show them what humans can do." The ship's engines hummed to life, and they shot through the void, heading straight for the outpost that would become the spark of their rebellion. The mining colony was a bleak and desolate place, carved into the rocky surface of a barren moon. The air was thick with dust, and the dull hum of machinery droned endlessly in the background. The slaves, beaten, exhausted, and broken, moved through the work camps like ghosts, their spirits long since crushed under the weight of the Drogar's rule. Sam and his crew approached the colony cautiously, docking their stolen transport in a remote section of the outpost where the guards rarely patrol. They moved through the shadows, avoiding detection as they made their way toward the heart of the camp. Tessa scanned the area, her eyes sharp. "We need to find a way to talk to the slaves without alerting the guards. If the Drogar catch wind of us, it's over before we even start." Lena nodded, her voice low. "There's a gathering point near the central barracks. They meet there during shift changes. It's the only time they're not under direct supervision." Sam glanced at the others. "That's where we'll go. We need to convince them that they're not alone, and that we can win." They moved swiftly, weaving through the camp until they reached the central barracks. The slaves gathered in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones, their faces drawn and weary. The atmosphere was heavy with fear and resignation, but beneath it, Sam sensed something else, a flicker of hope, buried deep. He stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We're not here to hurt you," he said, his voice carrying just loud enough to draw their attention. "We're here to help." The slaves stared at him, their expressions ranging from confusion to suspicion. A grizzled old miner stepped forward, his voice rough. "Who the hell are you?" "We're escapees," Sam said. "Just like you, and we've had enough." Tessa stepped beside him, her voice steady and calm. "The Drogar think they own us. They think we're too broken to fight back, but they're wrong." The old miner scoffed. "Fight back? With what? You see any weapons around here?" Sam smiled grimly. "We don't need weapons. Not at first. What we need is unity." Crowd murmured, doubtful but intrigued. Sam could feel the tension building, years of anger, frustration, and helplessness bubbling beneath the surface. Paul stepped forward, his grin sharp and dangerous. "We've already escaped once. If we can do that, we can do anything." The old miner eyed them warily. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Dead serious," Sam replied. "We're done being their pets. It's time to show the Drogar what happens when you push people too far." There was a moment of silence, and then, slowly, cautiously, the slaves began to nod. A spark of defiance flickered in their eyes, and for the first time in years, they allowed themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could be free. Over the next few days, Sam and his crew worked tirelessly to organize the slaves into a fighting force. They taught them how to sabotage machinery, how to create distractions, and how to exploit the Drogar's arrogance. The slaves were quick learners. Desperation had a way of sharpening the mind. Marlowe rigged the mining equipment to malfunction at key moments, causing confusion and disruption throughout the camp. Tessa trained the slaves in basic medical techniques, knowing that they'd need every advantage once the fighting started. Paul scouted the guard patrols, identifying weak points in their defense, and Lena worked with the slaves to spread the message of rebellion to other camps, using code phrases that only they would understand. The first strike came swiftly and without warning. The slaves, armed with nothing but improvised weapons and raw determination, overran the guard posts, capturing key supply depots and cutting off the Drogar's communications. The guards, caught off guard by the ferocity of the attack, were overwhelmed before they could mount a proper defense. The news of the uprising spread like wildfire, reaching other slave camps across the system. Inspired by the rebellion, other captives rose up, taking control of their camps and driving the Drogar forces into retreat. What had started as a desperate escape had become a full-scale uprising. Sam stood at the heart of the camp, watching as the slaves cheered their victory. It was a sight he would never forget. Ordinary people, once beaten and broken, now standing tall and proud. "We did it," Tessa whispered, standing beside him. "We actually did it." Sam nodded, his heart swelling with pride, but he knew the fight was far from over. The Drogar wouldn't take this defeat lightly. They would return, and they would come with everything they had. "This is just the beginning," Sam said, his voice low but determined. "We've won the first battle, but the war is still ahead." Lena approached, her expression serious. "We intercepted some communications. The Drogar are regrouping. They're sending reinforcements to crush the uprising." Sam clenched his fists. "Then we hit them first. We take the fight to them." The others nodded, their faces set with grim determination. They were no longer captives, no longer pets. They were rebels, and they would stop at nothing to bring the Drogar Empire to its knees. As the camp prepared for the battles to come, Sam allowed himself a moment to reflect. They had come so far, but there was still a long road ahead. The Drogar had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make that mistake again, but it didn't matter. The humans, and the countless others they had inspired, were ready. They had tasted freedom, and they would never go back. The Drogar Empire thought they had broken them, them. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The rebel fleet drifted in the quiet dark of space, hidden behind a thick asteroid belt. The stolen ships, pieced together from scraps and scavenged parts, looked more like a collection of flying junk heaps than a proper armada. But for Sam and his crew, they were symbols of freedom. What had begun as a desperate escape from a Drogar prison had evolved into a movement that spanned systems, uniting enslaved species under a single banner. And now that banner was poised to strike a blow that would shatter the Drogar Empire. Sam stood on the bridge of their ship, the same transport they'd stolen during their breakout, now outfitted with weapons and reinforced armor. Tessa stood beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the tactical display. Marlowe, Lena, and Paul were spread across various consoles, preparing for the fight ahead. "All right," Sam said, addressing the crew through the comms. "This is it. The Drogar fleet's command center is stationed just beyond the asteroid belt. We've got one chance to take it out before their reinforcements arrive. We hit them hard, hit them fast, and leave nothing behind." Tessa leaned closer to Sam, her voice low. "You think we can pull this off?" Sam grinned. "No idea. But since when has that stopped us?" Marlowe's voice crackled over the comms from the engine room. "I've got the reactors primed. If this thing holds together for one more fight, it'll be a miracle." "Good enough for me," Sam replied. "Everyone, get ready. We move on my mark." The plan was audacious, borderline suicidal. The Drogar command center was protected by a full fleet of warships, any one of which could annihilate the rebels with a single volley. But Sam knew that brute force wasn't their way. Humans thrived on chaos, on improvisation, and if they could create enough confusion, they just might pull off the impossible. "Engines to full," Sam ordered. "Take us through the asteroid field." The ship rumbled as it shot forward, weaving between the massive rocks that floated lazily through space. The other rebel vessels followed close behind, moving with precision born from desperation and hard-earned experience. As they approached the edge of the asteroid field, the Drogar fleet came into view, massive, sleek warships arranged in a perfect formation around the command center. The command ship itself was a behemoth, bristling with weapons and defenses. It looked like an impossible target, but impossible had never stopped them before. "Deploy decoys," Sam ordered. Small drones shot out from the rebel ships, broadcasting false signatures that mimicked the energy output of larger vessels. The Drogar fleet immediately reacted, shifting position to intercept what they believed to be an incoming assault. "Now!" Sam shouted. "Hit them!" The rebel ships surged forward, slipping through the gaps in the Drogar formation before the enemy could react. Plasma cannons roared, and missiles streaked through the void, slamming into the Drogar warships and throwing their formation into chaos. Sam's transport ship dived straight toward the command center, dodging enemy fire with reckless abandon. Tessa worked the targeting systems, firing bursts of energy at the command ship's shields, weakening them just enough to create an opening. "Lena, get ready," Sam said through the comms. "You're up." Lena nodded from her console, her fingers flying over the controls as she hacked into the Drogar's communications network. "Broadcasting now," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Across the Drogar fleet, every screen and comm channel suddenly lit up with a single message. "The enslaved rise. Your empire falls." It wasn't just a message, it was a spark. Across the galaxy, slaves and captives who had been waiting for a sign took up arms, attacking Drogar outposts and crippling their infrastructure. The empire, already stretched thin, was caught completely off guard. Inside the command center, confusion reigned. Officers shouted conflicting orders, trying to restore control as the rebel fleet tore through their defenses. Paul's voice crackled over the comms. "We're getting close. Just need one more push." Sam gritted his teeth, steering the ship toward the heart of the command center. "Marlowe, now would be a great time for that miracle." "On it," Marlowe replied, and the ship's engines roared to life, surging forward with a burst of speed that threw everyone against their seats. They slammed into the command center's docking bay, the impact shaking the entire ship. The crew scrambled out, weapons in hand, as Drogar soldiers poured into the bay, roaring with rage. "Keep moving," Sam shouted, firing his weapon as he led the charge toward the command center's control room. The rebels fought with the desperate ferocity of those who had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. Tessa fought at Sam's side, her movements precise and deadly. Paul barreled through the enemy lines, clearing a path with brute force, while Lena provided cover fire, her aim sharp and unerring. They reached the control room just as Marlowe hacked the doors open, and the crew stormed inside, overwhelming the Drogar officers in a matter of seconds. Sam rushed to the central console, his hands flying over the controls. Come on, what's the plan?" Tessa asked, firing at the doors to keep the reinforcements at bay. Sam grinned. "We're going to give them a little gift." With a final keystroke, he initiated the command ship's self-destruct sequence. The console flashed red, and alarms blared throughout the command center. "We've got 2 minutes," Sam shouted. "Everyone, back to the ship." The crew sprinted back to the docking bay, dodging enemy fire as they boarded their transport. The engines roared to life, and the ship shot out of the command center just as the self-destruct sequence reached 0. The explosion was blinding, a massive fireball that consumed the command center and several nearby Drogar warships. The shockwave sent debris scattering across the void, and the remaining Drogar vessels, now leaderless and disorganized, retreated in confusion. The rebel fleet regrouped, cheers erupting over the comms as the realization of their victory sank in. They had done it. The Drogar command center was destroyed, and the Empire was in disarray. Sam slumped back in his seat, exhausted but triumphant. Tessa sat beside him, a weary grin on her face. "We actually did it," she whispered. "Yeah," Sam replied, his voice filled with both disbelief and pride. "We did." The comms crackled with messages from other rebel groups across the galaxy, reporting their own victories. The uprising was spreading, and the Drogar Empire was crumbling. Marlowe appeared in the doorway, grinning ear to ear. "So, what's next, boss?" Sam leaned back, a satisfied smile tugging at his lips. Now we rebuild." Tessa clapped him on the shoulder. "Not bad for a bunch of pets, huh?" Sam laughed, a sound filled with relief and triumph. "Not bad at all." As the rebel fleet soared into the stars, leaving the wreckage of the Drogar Empire behind, Sam allowed himself a moment of peace. They had been taken as pets, treated as harmless creatures, and underestimated at every turn. But humans were never meant to be caged, and now the galaxy knew it too.